We discuss important topics with Roman Svitan. Roman, good evening. I wish you all good health. Roman, we have a busy Monday afternoon, but before we begin our conversation, we turn to our audience. Please like this video, comment with your city and country, and subscribe to the channel. This will help us reach more people with our messages. The head of the presidential office, Syrskyi, announced that President Zelensky will address the Verkhovna Rada on Wednesday to present his victory plan. Additionally, we have information that next week will focus on giving Ukraine the chance to achieve peace by force. Roman, I have a question for you. What are your expectations for the victory plan, and how might it be perceived by the public, especially the military? And how do you personally see how it is possible nowadays to end the war or stop it by diplomatic and military means? There's no way diplomatically. No war has ever really ended that way. It was delayed in time, and then it came back. Therefore, it is possible to end hostilities only by destroying the Russian army, which means the victory of Ukraine over Russia and the collapse of the Russian Empire. There can be no other plan if this is a plan for victory and not another Minsk III. Let's see what it will be about, and then we will discuss it all. To fulfill the task of the collapse of the Russian Empire, and this is the task that should be the main one, it is necessary to remember that without the destruction of this state, we will not have peace. Exactly as long as the Russian Empire will exist, there will be wars on Ukrainian territory. That is for sure. The approach here must be comprehensive. The Russian Empire can only be destroyed by economic means. This means that the maximum number of world powers that can influence Russia economically should be involved. There should be some arrangements between hydrocarbon producers, such as the Saudis and the US. There are many mechanisms that must be included. We alone will not cope with the collapse of the Russian Empire. Ukraine alone will not cope. We can definitely handle the destruction of the Russian army with the right approach. We need enough of our own weapons and a professional Ukrainian army, possibly including some foreign units. Additionally, we need an unrestricted supply of weapons, no limits on quantity, usage, or types. If we are to destroy the Russian army, these are the only viable options. Reaching the borders of the 91st year, that is, restoring the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the state, should be fundamental. And how all this should happen should remain 70 to 80% classified. It's not possible to integrate this into the general information flow, so we'll likely only hear political slogans. On Wednesday, we'll get another slogan, but it won't be a plan or a roadmap, as that can't be shared openly. We've heard many slogans already, and I doubt we'll hear anything new. Roman, regarding the situation in Kherson, President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the Russians have been attempting to break through our defenses there for 5 days. The enemy previously deployed 40,000 to 50,000 troops and numerous armored vehicles, which are now in battle. What is your assessment of the situation in the Kursk region? How long can we hold this line of defense, and is it necessary to do so right now? Well, they're not trying for the 5th day. They broke through 5 days ago. That is, they broke through our defenses and cut in. There is tactical movement towards Lyubimovka, Novo-Ivanovka. There is movement, but they were tracked by our intelligence. A certain amount of preparatory work was done, and we carried out offensive actions in the rear of this grouping in the Veseloy area. By and large, this is not a one-stage move by the Russians. We have been holding the Russian breakthrough in this direction for a week now. We have been holding back the Russian counteroffensive in this direction for almost a week. In addition, in the direction of Snyegosti, Lyubimovka, the Russians have also joined in from the southeast, trying to squeeze us out of the Borok area, east of Suja, and pressing us from both sides. It's very hard, but the task was to carry out linking operations when entering Kurshchina. The more Russians will be involved in such offensive operations, the more successful will be the task to bind Russian troops, to withdraw them from the main directions of the Eastern Front, Pokrovsk direction, Donetsk, Kurakovo, Chasov Yar. The Russians there are trying to move and use the last dry days before the fall and winter period. Our task now is to tie up the troops that the Russians are moving there as much as possible by fighting in the Kursk region. Further on, depending on the operational situation, a decision will be taken on movement in each direction. After all, these are maneuverable battles, and we can both advance and withdraw, involving the Russians in new operations. This is what our control mechanism in this direction will show us right now. Romane, Ramstein will probably take place after the presidential elections in the United States of America. The German edition of ZDF writes about it. We would like to remind you that the elections are scheduled for the beginning of the fall. Romane, we would like to ask you, should we take this as an alarming signal for Ukraine, or is it purely about the political situation? The main question is, how does it affect the battlefield? This time, it won't affect in a negative way. That's for sure. There won't be anything positive. That is, what was expected won't appear. At least not what we expected from Ramstein. Although, as you and I have said many times, you don't have to be enchanted to not be disappointed. It's just not being held. So we have nothing to say. We didn't expect anything from it. This is purely a political conjuncture, based on the preferences of American society and voters. There are other areas where it is important for the Democrats to prove themselves before the elections, and perhaps some issues have simply been decided to be drowned out. One trend is likely the decision by political technologists for Biden and Kamala Harris to avoid escalating tensions with Moscow and postpone Ramstein until after the election. This is purely a political move, so there's no need to be upset. We expected it. Everything is proceeding as planned, with the expected amount of ammunition and equipment arriving, along with an additional $8 billion program for the new fiscal year. Of course, it won't all arrive at once, but it does indicate a supply of U.S. aid for the next few months. Thus, the absence of Ramstein, or the political issues surrounding it, will not adversely affect combat missions in any way. Romane, we are calling our viewers. You can write your thoughts on this YouTube broadcast right now. Right where you are watching us from. We see everything, we read everything, and we thank you for your activity.
миллиардов она, понятно, вся не зайдет к нам сразу, ну, по крайней мере, это можно говорить о дальнейших нескольких месяцах, как минимум, поставок американской помощи из-под этой 8
You mentioned
миллиардной
Toretsk
программы.
and
Поэтому
Pokrovsk.
все
We would
идет
like
по
to talk
плану.
about
На
this in more
данный момент
detail
можно сказать
because the
только
Russian occupants
отсутствие
really do not
Рамштайна и
mind the
какие-то
loss of
моменты
life.
политически связанные с Рамштайном никак отрицательно не скажутся на
Anastasia
выполнении.
Bobovnikova, a member of the operational and tactical group Luhansk, said on the telethon.
Свою думку під цією YouTube-трансляцією прямо зараз. Напишіть, звідки ви нас дивитеся. Ми все бачимо, все читаємо. Вам дякуємо за активність.
The enemy's tactics in capturing Toretsk and Donetsk are effective, with Russians aiming to fully capture Donetsk and Luhansk. However, Ukrainian forces are giving them the upper hand. As for the situation near Toretsk, we would like you to think of Pokrovsk. We will also see this direction on the map later. The loss of Toretsk will bring some consequences. In your opinion, what threats will there be for us in the future?
Нині дають їм відсіч. Що нині поблизу Турецька, так само хочемо, щоб ви пригадали Покровськ. Ми на карті потім також побачимо цей напрямок. Втрата населеного пункту Турецька.
When it comes to Luhansk region, the Russians still have plans to reach its borders. Practically only Bilohorivka is left. They forced us out of Makiivka in Luhansk region. Now the Bilohorivka vistas keep the direction to the east-eastern direction of Chasovy Yar and Toretsk.
Положительные планы дойти до их границы. Там практически осталась только Белогоровка у них, они с нас с Макеевки выдавили, Луганской Макеевки. То есть практически Белогоровский выступ сейчас удерживает направление.
We have been holding the northern line and Bilohorivka for 3 years now, quite successfully. This is part of the Luhansk region, one of the key tasks of the Russians in this direction.
Вот мы его удерживаем уже как минимум 3-й год. Довольно-таки успешная. Вот это как раз и есть часть Луганской области. Вот у россиян одна из задач, они там также довольно-таки серьезно этим вопросом занимаются. Но то, что по Луганской области...
In the Luhansk region, there may be hopes of resolving the issue this year, but the Russians definitely won't reach the Donetsk region's borders. There are significant uncertainties regarding their future movements, but they will continue to try. Currently, they are attempting to apply pressure in the Pokrovsk direction, although they know they won't approach it head-on, having already been stopped 5 to 7 kilometers from the city. They will attempt to expand the front line toward Mirnorad in the north and Seledovo in the south, with the Pokrovsko-Mirnorad agglomeration already forming. The main pressure is currently on Mirnograd and Seledovo, where battles are ongoing. We have been regaining lost positions to prevent the Russians from encircling Seledovo, and our positions there look promising. However, Pokrovsk is not an immediate concern. Toretsk and Kurakovo are short-term targets for the Russians, who are deploying maximum reserves at Kurakovo. Capturing the Kurakovskaya TPP is crucial for their strategy this fall and winter, affecting the economic stability of Donetsk, which is facing severe electricity and water shortages. Makayevka is especially impacted, with water available only a few hours a day and ongoing electricity issues in Donetsk. Kurakovo TPP is one of the main targets for the Russians, as the Starobeshevo TPP works mainly for Mariupol, and the Zuevskaya TPP works for the Yenikiev iron and steel works. Donetsk is facing serious water and electricity shortages, so Kurakovo is of strategic importance. But Kurakovo is still a long way off. We are now holding positions in the north, near Ukrainsk and Selidov, and preventing the Russians from turning on Kurakovo from the northwest. The problems are big in Toretsk. This direction is a priority for the Russians because they are using Horlivka as a major military hub. Toretsk is only a few kilometers away, and they are trying to squeeze out our garrison in order to capture the Toretskia heights.
По северу, в районе того же Украинска, того же Селидова не даем россиянам развернуться с северо-запада на Курахово. Удерживаем позиции возле Угледара, они прошли там несколько километров
If we compare the Russians' actions in terms of geography and tactics, their maneuvers are similar to those in the Avdiivka and Ocheretin areas, both of which are on the heights.
Сейчас для россиян турецкое направление одно из приоритетных, скорее всего, станет тоже в ближайшее время. Почему? Потому что пытаются они выдавить. Им, во-первых, удобно это делать. Горловка большой военный хаб. Рядом несколько километров уже Торецк. Они пытаются выдавить наш гарнизон.
The Russians are trying to dislodge us from Chasovyar, as well as from Toretsk, because the heights here are strategically important. Toretsk is the dominant height over Horlivka, which itself is up to 300 meters high.
Можно сравнить действия россиян в районе Авдеевки и Очеретина. Очеретина чуть выше Авдеевки. Авдеевка была на высотах, Очеретина на высотах. Вот та же самая картина с такой же тактикой. Россияне сейчас пытаются выдавить нас с Часовьяра. Часовьяр это, Часовьяр, Торецк. Торецк это тоже высоты, даже там превышение над Горловкой. Горловка высота находится на высотах там в районе до 300 метров. И Часовьяр, то есть это одни из таких высоких точек Донбасса. И вот они пытаются сбросить нас с этой господствующей высоты. Та же самая вопрос, как и по Часовьяру. Бахмут в низине, Часовьяр на высоте. И вот здесь та же картина. Пытаться будут сбрасывать с господствующих высот Торецка. Ну а основная задача им выйти с юга, зайти в сторону Константиновки, а дальше, чтобы давить на Часовьярские высоты уже со стороны...
Capturing the heights of Toretsk will allow the Russians to advance to Konstantinovka and further to the Chasovyar heights, which could open the way to the Kramatorsk, Druzhkiv, Slavic agglomeration.
Видна, в принципе, задумка, но опять же, это очень далеко еще. То есть вопросы по Торецку полностью россиянами не решены. Мы удерживаем часть Торецка, большую часть россияне уже, можно сказать, контролируют непосредственно войсками, часть серой зоны и часть...
However, all this is still far from being realized. The issue of Toretsk has not been fully resolved. We are holding part of the city, including the northwestern part and the gray zone. What decisions will be taken at the level of commanders will be clear in the near future. Either we will hold the heights, or we will retreat closer to Konstantinovka and create a new line of defense, depending on the outcome of the fighting. And until positive news, Roman. On October 13th, a military transport plane, the Tu-134, was destroyed at the Orenburg 2 airfield. What can you tell us about its role in the war and your assessment of the current state of Russian aviation resources? Well, I will hope that it is our intelligence officers who are being helped by their Kazakh brothers. I understand perfectly well that Kazakhstan, like Donbass in its time, can be subjected first to hybrid actions, so-called wars, and then to invasion by the Russians. This also applies to Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia. There are 3 points in our post-Soviet space: Ukraine, the Donbass region and Crimea, the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Kazakhstan, especially northern Kazakhstan, where a large number of Russians and Russian speakers live.
У казахов есть, они, по крайней мере, тоже прогнозируют вот эти проблемы, связанные с расширением Российской империи, с воссозданием Советского Союза.
Kazakhs have fears related to the expansion of the Russian Empire and the re-establishment of the Soviet Union. Russia does not calm down with its collapse and even recalls the Roman Empire, although it would seem that they would be better off directing their forces towards Italy. However, they are moving towards the Balkans, and this is a fact. Kazakhs have these concerns, and I hope that they help us. We recently discussed operations to destroy military facilities in Orsk, an oil refinery in Omsk, and facilities in Orenburg. This is all one belt, the north of Kazakhstan, where the border with Kazakhstan is from a few kilometers to 150. This belt is influenced by the Kazakh diaspora, and I hope that our Kazakh friends are helping us in this sense. The Tu-134 is a plane that is used for military purposes as a transporter, mostly to transport old generals. But the fact of destruction itself is important. This is evidence of the long arms of our intelligence. The main directorate of intelligence got to Orenburg. And once again, I hope that with the help of our Kazakh friends. Romanet, North Korea has ordered its artillery forces at the border with the east to prepare for shooting, the Yon newspaper reports. And the publication also notes that there are signs of this, that East Korea can make the roads spill over to East Korea. Pyongyang promised to shut down inter-Korean roads. Roman, in your opinion, how frightening is such a scenario in general? What is the reason for DPRK's threats against East Korea? And how, if such an escalation occurs, how will it affect Ukraine? Well, the South Korean intelligence services probably arranged for some drones to fly into North Korea with leaflets that gently put the North Korean leader in an unfavorable light. He took it as a personal insult, and a tantrum ensued. He started stomping his feet and was lifted over the table so he could better see the direction toward South Korea. Next, he chased his artillerymen to turn around for combat missions. He'll likely get over it soon. Xi Jinping will calm him down. However, he might blow up roads on his side north of the 38th parallel. He won't target UN troops, as the blue helmets are deployed along the demilitarized zone, which is only 3 to 5 kilometers. But it's possible he'll cause some explosions on his side to release his hysteria. Also, Romani, we will not forget to address our audience here. If you are watching just now, please like this video. Write where you are watching us from, your city, your country. We know that many people are watching us, including those who are in the occupied territories. Do not forget about your safety, the main thing, but if you can, write your comments if you are sure you are safe. Mr. Romane, as a continuation of this topic, President Zelensky, referring to the report of the intelligence service, reported about the actual involvement in the war in South Korea. The question here is for you as a military analyst. In what format and in what volumes?
Можна, то пишіть свої коментарі, якщо ви точно в безпеці. І, пане Романе, от в продовження цієї теми президент Зеленський, посилаючись на доповідь розвідки, повідомив про фактичне включення у війну Північної Кореї. Тут питання до вас, як до військового аналітика, в якому форматі...
And in simple words, how can it affect the war nowadays without any direct impact on the battlefield, on the front? North Korea has been providing serious military aid to Russia since last year, moving equipment, ammunition, missiles, rockets, shells, and ballistic missiles, including the KN-23. We have already spoken about this on a number of occasions. The Russian military receives serious complaints about the entire range of munitions and equipment, including North Korean munitions and equipment. Naturally, all of this is accompanied by certain cargoes to monitor their use and to receive feedback on these complaints. North Korean engineering military units have been stationed on the territory of Russia and occupied Ukraine since last year. They perform various tasks, one of which is escorting military cargo. Now a decision has been made to train and deploy so-called line units to the line of contact, which will perform tasks directly at the front. This could pose a danger to us, especially if there are many such units. If there are several battalions, or even several thousand North Koreans, their participation may go unnoticed, since they are virtually indistinguishable from Koreans living in Russia and mobilized into the army. Those who don't know anything can't distinguish them from Buryats, except for a slightly wider face, but even that is not always noticeable. Our intelligence will, of course, quickly identify their presence, and diplomatic mechanisms will be employed to make the world community aware of the participation of North Korean troops on the line of contact as line units. However, if the North Koreans are not a few battalions but brigades or regiments, and if their numbers reach tens of thousands, this could create serious problems for us. For example, about 100,000 Koreans could create a Pokrovsk-level operational breakthrough, where the Russians, numbering about 100,000, worked for a year but accomplished their task. The same picture could be repeated with North Korea. Theoretically, this possibility exists, but in practice, it is hard to say.
Когда начались некоторые трения между Южной Кореей и Северной Кореей, допустим, чтобы там Ким Чен Ын...
There has been some friction between South and North Korea, and Kim Jong-un is unlikely to send 100,000 North Koreans to our front. Although it is theoretically possible, and we should be prepared for it. I think, as soon as there are enough North Korean troops on the line of contact, those interested in destroying them, such as South Korea, Japan, and the United States, will give us enough weapons to unwind these North Korean soldiers to zero so that they come back as packages. Although, most likely, they will not be taken back. They will be buried in Ukrainian Chernozem. Romanet, Ukraine has information that Putin may visit the summit of the Great 24th Summit in Brazil, which will be held in October. The Prosecutor General said this with reference to an interview with Reuters. We understand that the Brazilian authorities, as a state party to the Rome Statute, are obliged to arrest Putin if he decides to come. But do you think Putin will make such a decision? Will the Brazilian authorities still be able to respond and arrest Vladimir Putin? I don't have to, but no one is doing anything about the Budapest Memorandum. We lost nuclear status and transferred weapons, including nuclear weapons, to Russia. In the end, one of the signatories attacked us, and the other two, without even moving, practically in due time, back in 2014, allowed the Russians to seize Crimea and Donbass. We saw all this in 2022, and even now, in the third year of the war, it's looking more and more like excuses. This assistance that we are receiving now resembles an imitation of participation, nothing more. Therefore, it is not worth saying that someone somewhere is obliged, especially since we have seen how, after Putin's visit to Mongolia, no one moved. Now, some actions have been launched in Musa and in the International Criminal Court, but that is nothing more. All these agreements and papers are not even worth a piece of paper. It is definitely not worth reacting to. Putin will not take into account this aspect of Brazil's actions or inactions in any way. If he goes, or rather if he does not go, it will not be a reason to react to this Musovian protocol. There will be some other reason related to travel distance, certain security of being there, or issues he may face at the G20. All of these organizations will not be able to help in any way.
все эти организации озабоченных наций, они по большому счету никак нам никогда не, я больше скажу, больше помешали. Не то, что не помогли, мешали однозначно. Кому сейчас мешает Международный уголовный суд? Да он украинской армии.
Who is now hindered by the International Criminal Court? It is, by and large, hindering the Ukrainian army, especially after we recently signed and ratified this charter. We will implement it, and it turns out that it prevents us from carrying out certain tasks, sometimes even exposing our military to further prosecution of any level. For the Russians, it does not interfere at all. They simply do not react to it. If Putin has already flown to Mongolia and nothing has happened, they have not kicked them out of this organization. They have not eliminated the Mongolian judge, who also works in the International Criminal Court. There will be no reaction. We should not hope for that, so that we are not disappointed later. Let us not be charmed by the United Nations, the OSCE, or the Red Cross. It certainly does not bring any advantages for us. The only thing we do is spend money from our budget. All these organizations are now, at the moment, completely obsolete. We need to withdraw from them, take our representatives out of there, stop spending money on them, and get on with destroying the Russian army and the occupiers on our land, using the military component as much as possible. Diplomatic absolutely does not work. It ties our hands while our adversaries do not. Romane, let's also discuss the fact that today, for the first time in the last 48 days, the night passed without the launching of Shaheds across Ukraine. This is being reported by the monitoring channels. Remember, last week we spoke about the result of the successful work of our intelligence and our armed forces in Ukraine, where several hundred Shahedin were eliminated. Question for you. Is this the result of Ukrainian intelligence work? And in your opinion, how long will it take for the Russians to restore this lineup and launch shakedowns on Ukraine again? Maybe it will happen within a week after all, and the Russians won't be able to send Shaheds to our territory? To put it in a kind irony, perhaps today Putin is afraid of our holiday, the creation of the UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. Maybe this day will be defined as the day of the creation of another UPA, the Ukrainian Professional Army. Putin knows perfectly well what the UPA is. He knows the Soviet past, because the KGB at one time destroyed our patriots and exiled them to distant Russian camps. For several decades, they could not cope with our underground and patriotic army. Putin may have such negativity, and he gave the command not to touch even the memory of the UPA. This highlights a certain irony regarding our capabilities. Our intelligence and special services, including Special Operations Forces, the Foreign Intelligence Service, and the Main Intelligence Directorate, have significantly contributed to destroying Russian warehouses and locating the Shahd production, storage, and logistics. This work is serious, lengthy, painstaking, and dangerous, involving active engagement from our agents. Our armed forces, including missile forces and aviation, with the help of drones and special services, have worked on the storage sites of Shahedin. Although, no matter how many of them we destroy there, even if it is 500 at a time, this is, after all, a week and a half's work by Russian factories producing them. Shaheds are produced mainly in Tatarstan, and their element base is mainly Chinese and Iranian. Although the main one is Iranian, the Chinese element base is present. The main units and assemblies come from the Chinese factory Sunflower 200. Shahed 200 is a copy of the Chinese drone, and the Russians are now directly getting the units and assemblies from China, possibly through North Korea or some other spacer. For them to lose 400 to 500 Shaheeds in stock is at most a week and a half of production.
Подсолнуха 200, шахет это копипаст, подсолнух 200, китайский беспилотник, и россияне сейчас напрямую получают с Китая, может быть, через Северную Корею, там через какую-то прокладку, получают с Китая эти узлы-агрегаты, собирают, и для них, в принципе, потери там 400-500 шахедов даже на складе, ну, максимум полутора.
I think the reason for this failure of the Shaheeds now is not a direct connection. To partially disable supplies, we need to destroy the factories in Tatarstan, starting from Kazan and ending with Alabuga. Around the 20th, they will start operating. And when the leaders of the BRICS, the semi-terrorist organizations, will be meeting, that's when they will hold meetings.
Производство, начиная от Казани и заканчивая Алабугой. Работать оптимально, как раз работать, когда там БРИКС будет собираться. Такой нежданчик, чтобы у них был. Это я специально на их сленге говорю, чтобы они понимали. Вот они там в районе 20-го начнут кучковаться. И вот когда эти все руководители БРИКСа, руководители этих, можно сказать, полутеррористических уже организаций, раз они там собираются, и ручкаются с Путиным в террористической организации Российской Федерации.
To strike seriously at this very moment, to keep them in their basements for a few hours, would be very effective. Then they will embrace Putin, and it should be carried out. Our intelligence agencies should be advised to destroy the Shahed factories with all the means we have at our disposal at this very time when the BRICS are gathering in Kazan. The longer this attack takes, the better. The more these BRICS leaders have problems, the better it will be for us and for the world community as a whole.
Будут подпрыгивать по бирже по 17 гривен, тем лучше будет для нас и для мирового сообщества в том числе.
Thank you, Roman, for the informative conversation and your insights. Roman Svitan, instructor of the Ukrainian Army Reserve, addressed today's key question. Vladyslav Solovyov and Olga Bilan here. Please like this video, comment with your location, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Ваше місто, ваша країна, не забувайте про це. Підпишіться на цей YouTube канал та побачимось в ефірі на 24-му.